We met at Elevate down in Charlotte recently, and I learned that you're an avid alligator hunter.
I went with someone the year before, saw the process. We applied for permits. It seemed like a lot of fun. And once we started, it was one of the most fun things I've done in my life.
I wanted to talk about following the money. Sometimes people come to me and they think that they need to become a design build company when they're not, and they overstretch themselves trying to do design build. It goes poorly and they end up hurting their reputation. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Landscaper's Guide. Today I'm excited to interview my client, Jason Lee. He's the owner of SkyFrog Landscape down in Gainesville, Florida, and he's also the co-host of the Green Side Up podcast with his buddy Jordan. Jason, thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Jack, thanks for having me. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Tell us a little bit about SkyFrog. Where are you guys, and what's some of your background in the landscape industry?
So SkyFrog Landscape is headquartered in Gainesville, Florida. So we're kind of north central Florida. We're about an hour north of Ocala, kind of an hour and a half from everywhere. So we're an hour and a half from the west coast of Florida, hour and a half from the east coast, north central, about an hour and 15 minutes from the Florida Georgia border. So that's our general location, kind of right smack dab in the middle of the state. Gainesville is known for the University of Florida and the Gators. So go Gators. We actually accomplished a winning football season this year. So for college football fans, that's a big win for Gainesville after a few poor years. Um, I grew up about an hour and a half east of Gainesville in a small rural town in Putnam County and got introduced to horticulture at a very young age. My family had an acre of cut foliage where we grew tree fern, and we cut that for the greenery for flower arrangements. So that was my introduction into plants and horticulture. Probably at 8 or 10 years old, my dad started me growing container plants. So I grew three varieties of container plants and sold them to local retail and wholesale nurseries at, from 8 to 10 years old, probably in through high school. I continued to do that. And then once I could drive, I just naturally started doing, cleanups for people, weed eating, push mowing. I'd throw the push mower in the back of the truck and that type of thing. Did not live in any area where I could have the traditional, take the push mower around the neighborhood. There were no neighbors. So and then I figured out that if I put a couple yards of cypress mulch in the back of the truck, uh, I could make $80 to $100 if I went and spread that in somebody's flower beds. So that kind of started part of my landscape installation career. And after graduating high school, I knew that I wanted to do something outdoors and didn't want to be stuck in an office. So I went to the University of Florida, was looking at their agricultural programs, and stumbled upon landscape and nursery management. So I figured, I've been growing plants for, better part of my life, been dabbling in landscaping. I might as well go do that. And so I went to study environmental horticulture at UF, and that was a great experience. Went through their program, got my bachelor's degree there, and continued to do more design build, as I learned more about landscaping while I was there, and operated a, kind of small design build firm company while I was going to school there.
That's awesome. And so tell us about what are all the services that SkyFrog offers nowadays?
So we're a full service company. We offer design build services, mainly focusing on residential renovations. So a lot we consider kind of enhancement work for landscapes. There's a lot of 20, 30-year-old landscapes in Gainesville, neighborhoods that are maturing. So a large book of our work is going in and doing tear outs and new softscapes, redoing hardscapes or installing hardscapes where none were installed before. We do a little bit of new home construction, a little bit of bid build construction, not a large part of our book of work. And then probably half of our book of work is landscape maintenance. So we do a large amount of commercial maintenance, including HOAs and office complexes and things of that nature. And then we have probably about 150 to 180 residential accounts. So it makes up about 30% of our landscape maintenance book of work.
Awesome. And so we met at Elevate down in Charlotte recently, and I learned that you're an avid alligator hunter.
I am.
So we we had a great conversation about that, and I was just tell us a little bit, how'd you get into alligator hunting? And I think you've gone with some other landscape industry people recently. So tell us a little bit about that.
So we started, I guess we've been in 2004 was the first year that we actually hunted alligators. And, growing up in Florida, we gig frogs. That's another adventure where we go out and harvest frogs and fry frog legs. And so a lot of things on the river and outdoors. My dad was he's a retired game warden with the Florida Freshwater Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, and so he was a game warden, the entire time that I grew up, and so outdoors all the time. Just never really was introduced to alligator hunting until I was in 2004. I was in college, and we just applied for permits. So I went with someone the year before, saw the process. We applied for permits. It seemed like a lot of fun, and once we started, it's the time of I don't know. It's one of the most fun things I've done in my life. So it's a blast. We haven't stopped. We are avid, as you said. We're avid alligator hunters. Slightly obsessed would be an understatement. So yeah, so we've been doing it ever since. We love taking new people. Been in a peer group for the past 4 years with some other landscape contractors from across the country. So I recently, I'm 9 days out of shoulder surgery. So I think when I saw you, I was pre-surgery up at Elevate, but I injured myself when we had Mark Smith with Smith Lawnscapes out of St. John's, Michigan, and then Matt Heiner with Heiner Outdoor Living from Colorado Springs. They were both down hunting with me, and I tore my rotator cuff. So
And that was pulling a big alligator into the boat, right?
I was trying to catch the big alligator and I missed, and I missed. So the fact that I missed with the big hook yanking on the rope very hard, that's what popped. That's what the lack of resistance popped the rotator cuff. But we've it's a good networking thing. So I mean, we obviously with friends and family, we take out we take some clients out, other contractors, people we know. It's we guide a little bit for a professional guide service when they need extra help or extra hands and an extra boat. So just a nice fun. So it's actually it's a great hobby to have. It's quite entertaining.
Yeah, and I hunt deer and elk here in Colorado, and turkey. I fish for trout, and deer and elk. There's a season, and then there are tags, and some of them are only good for. I think one of them is only good for 4 days,
Yep,
and that's it. So, what's alligator? What are the regulations like in Florida? Is it a bag limit for the whole year, or is there a season, or what's that like?
it is. So there's a bag limit for the whole year. It's a true lottery system with no preference points for the hunters out there. I believe that some of your stuff in Colorado is probably based on preference points, and a lot of the other big game out west. So it's a no preference points, 100% lottery system. You get two tags, so two permits if you get drawn, and then you get drawn for a specific area and a specific week, and they give out 4 specific weeks that you can hunt. And then after that, there's a 8 week makeup period. So the hunt is between August 15th and November 1st. So you get drawn for a specific area, specific time, and then if you don't harvest your alligator in that first week, then you can have the next whatever it is, 6 or 8 weeks to make up that time and try to hunt.
And then the bag limit's two, right?
Yes.
So two per year,
Yep.
but only if you get a tag. So is it possible that you wouldn't get a tag in a year because of the lottery?
No, there is, and especially in the high demand areas. So the chances are getting lower and lower. Once Swamp People came out on TV, uh,
Uh,
the the demand for the demand for alligator hunting went up in Florida, so it's been growing ever since. Then, social media makes it more of a thing that people desire to go and do. So we probably have 16 to 20 people in our group, kind of hunting group over the years that go with us, and we have everybody put in for different areas around the state, based on where they live and how often they can hunt. We're probably drawing on like a 35 to 40% success rate. So it's
okay.
not a super high, and that's with putting in for some really good areas. And then the more you can go and the more time you have, we kind of put in for some lower, for what we consider lower end areas or harder to hunt. If we have somebody that's only going to be able to come for a weekend, we want them to, have a good area to go to so we can guarantee success a little bit easier.
What is the alligator hunt success rate? Here in Colorado for an elk, the overall success rate is really low. It's like 10 or 11%. So only 1 out of 10 guys will get one, or depending on how you look at it, 1 in 10 times that you go. There are of course hunters who are more skilled and better at it that have a higher rate, but of all the people who go, it's like 1 in 10. What's the success rate for an alligator in Florida?
I mean, I would say I don't know overall for us, we've gotten pretty good at the craft over the years. My partner Harry that I've been hunting with for probably 18 or 20 out of the years. we've kind of got a dialed in system that we use on the boat, and I would say in a given weekend, if we have 2 or 3 days to hunt, I would say it's a 90 to 100% success rate. It would have to be really bad weather for us not to be able to harvest something. And it also depends on what you're after. If you want that, you know, 12-inch, or I mean 12-foot alligator, which would probably equate to a 200-inch whitetail deer, then that's, we might have to go a little bit longer to accomplish that just because they're not swimming around everywhere. But no, our success rate's pretty high. As long as we're hunting in areas that our boat's conducive to, that we're used to hunting in. Now we're exploring more areas. We're going down to South Florida to hunt more, adds to the adventure. Just going to new places and seeing new things. Even though we're here in Florida, there's a giant difference between what the St. Johns River looks like in Northeast Florida versus Lake Okeechobee in South Florida. So
What's the ritual of alligator camp like for you? Like, do you rent a cabin? Do you camp in a tent? Like, what's it like what's the camp part like?
we've never really had. It's not so much a camp because normally we're hunting pretty local to where somebody lives. So it's for me. It's I'll stay at my friend Harry's house. When Matt and Mark came down, I brought my camper over, put them up at Renegades. Renegades on the river, so they stayed at. It's a really nice RV park on the river. We've rented some when we travel. A lot of times when we travel, we'll stay in hotel rooms, or we've gotten a few Airbnbs, especially if there's an Airbnb on the water and we can put the boat in. I think this happened twice, and that's awesome. Like that's a whole
That
nother,
sounds pretty
you know,
ideal.
yeah.
Yeah.
So that's pretty nice. So that's been some ideal hunting situations there, but it's not like the traditional deer camp I would consider.
Well, it sounds like an awesome adventure to go alligator hunting. And how much meat would you take home in the freezer, do you think, in a for your average alligator?
Most of our alligators we sell to a processor, and we sell the alligator whole to the processor, and then he processes them for meat for restaurants. And I would say on a 12-foot alligator, which is a very large alligator, he's probably yielding 125 to 150 pounds of clean white meat. So the legs and some of the other muscles on the alligator is more of a red meat. So for restaurants, they prefer kind of the white meat. And so he's probably getting 125 to 150 pounds of premium meat, and then he can sell the other meat for other things.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, I hope your shoulder heals up and you can get after it again next year. I recovered from a shoulder injury myself, and I wanted to share something. It's called crossover symmetry, and it's a at-home physical therapy band set that has all of these exercises that you do to strengthen the muscles in your shoulder. And man, that really helped me recover. I had some old sports injuries from when I was in high school that have come and gone, and they came back. And this was something crossover symmetry. I just seem to know a lot of people who've had shoulder injuries, so I thought I'd share it on the podcast.
Awesome. I appreciate that because we are now on the official road to recovery. So
Cool. Well, tell me about the Green Side Up podcast. So you've got SkyFrog Landscape. You guys are you're growing. You've been in business for a long time, and then is it a couple years ago that you started the Green Side Up podcast with Jordan?
we started January, February of this year. So I think we set it up when we initially launched. I think we'll end up with 52 episodes at the end of the year. So this will be
That's
our
a lot.
first
Yeah,
first full year in the podcast. We drop an episode every Thursday, so we're doing one a week.
that's cool. I enjoyed. I listened to the story with Corey Ballard, and that it was just kind of cool to hear you guys talk about how hurricane season is really a mixed blessing. In some ways it creates a lot of short-term work, a lot of cleanup work, and then for people who run tree care businesses, they're in some ways losing a client 3 years from now, right? Cuz maybe you're going to remove a tree that was knocked down from a hurricane, and now there's no tree to trim 3 years from now for that client.
It's and then different parts of the state is a lot different. For Jordan specifically in Tampa, they do a lot of pruning, so they prefer to preserve their trees. Nurture the trees, prune them properly. Try to create long term health. And so, unfortunately, in this last storm, which of course we were back to back hurricanes this year. So the first hurricane dumped a lot of water, which saturated the soils. Second hurricane comes in, more rain and a major wind event, and so a lot of the trees that they were seeing failed just failed from the root system. So they just toppled over. It wasn't that the tree was structurally defective. If there's a tree that's has structure problems, and a lot of times that's rated for removal and recommended for removal. So they had perfectly healthy trees with great structure that were just falling over. So that is a long-term loss for revenue. It's a short-term gain um, for a lot of headaches. So Jordan's been, I mean, he's spent 2 months just pulling his hair out, running as wide open as somebody could run. Us in the landscape world, I'm just up here. We pick up sticks for 2 weeks, and then it's kind of back to normal for us. But for the tree care industry, it's a I don't know. It's a big headache. So some people love it. I mean, you have tree guys out there that chase storms and they do storm work and they love it. And, that's great for them. But kind of for the home, when it hits a hometown tree company like Jordan and Tampa, that's more of a major ding.
Yeah, so I wanted to recommend your podcast to people. Lots of just great conversations with other landscape and tree professionals, and to suggest being a guest on your podcast or my podcast, or generally being a guest on podcasts. We just had our mastermind together, and I shared with people that being a guest, for those of you listening, being a guest on a podcast is great for your SEO, because most podcasts are going to have show notes that link to your website. And when you get links to your website from other people's websites, it helps you rank higher in Google and get found by your customers.
We had a call with Dana with Ramblin' Jackson. So we had a call, or every other week call with Dana yesterday, and we were talking about backlinks. So when you mentioned that earlier in the mastermind group, that's kind of clicked in my head. Is just like, well, if that counts as a backlink, that's a really good, that's a very easy thing for me for SkyFrog, since we're already doing the podcast, and we try to, we've kind of done a poor job of being on other people's podcasts, which for podcasters we probably need to do a little bit more. Probably
I
need to do
yeah.
a little bit more of. But whenever you said that earlier, it clicked. It's like, oh man, I need to make sure SkyFrog gets plugged, because if that helps the world of the Google algorithm, then that's a very easy thing there.
Yeah, and the chance of your customer listening to my podcast or of your landscape customer listening to your podcast is really pretty low. I mean, my audience is similar to yours. It's landscape industry professionals. And so even though we're showing up and serving the landscape industry with this conversation, it helps you get more landscape customers to an extent, because I'm going to give you yet another link to your website. And yeah, you're right. I need to go on a podcast tour next year. I'm working right now. I'm writing the second edition of the Tree of Good Fortune, and it's in the works, and we're getting chapters done. And when it's done, I'm gonna reach out to landscape industry podcasts and come on the show and share things that are working. So I got to do it.
That's a great
And
great way to help do a book tour.
oh, for
So
sure. Yeah, and if you haven't been a guest on a podcast, it's kind of easy. Like, we're just hanging out on Zoom, having a
yeah,
conversation, recording it, and then I'm going to do all the rest of the work with the help of my team to get the podcast up and running. So, yeah, check out greenside-up-podcast.com. I'll put a link in the show notes, right? Just as an example. There's yet another link. And I wanted to talk about following the money.
yeah.
So this was, something that we're collaborating on. Tell me, what does it mean to you? And let's talk about some ideas to help the audience follow the money and get more customers.
With SkyFrog, us being in Gainesville, I moved back to Gainesville. So as I mentioned earlier, I graduated from the University of Florida. And so between University of Florida and me starting SkyFrog, I worked on the East Coast of Florida for 2 years for Austin Outdoor, which was a large regional company at that point who got bought out by the Yellowstone Group. So during that point in time, the economy crashes, things were not looking so good. Palm Coast was the city that Austin Outdoor was headquartered in, and so they got dinged really hard with the construction business and construction businesses and all the mortgage stuff that was going on back then. So I saw Gainesville as kind of a isolated area that was a little protected from the recession then, which it was. And so when I decided to start my own business, it's like, well, I'll either go to St. Augustine or Jacksonville area, or I'll go back to Gainesville. And so I made the choice to go back to Gainesville, which then was great. But now, as we've grown our business uh, to the size that it is, I'm starting to see some limiting factors. And with the growth that we would like to have, it's really Gainesville's a large small town that has a university in it and a couple of really big hospitals. So that is, creates a lot of what Gainesville is, which is a great place to live. It's a great place to live. We don't have the hustle and bustle of Jacksonville. We don't have the traffic jams on I-4 of Orlando. So to live and raise a family, it's great. But then to grow the size landscape business that we'd like to have, I see some limiting factors, and one of them is the money. So, being in the middle of the state, we don't have that coastal money that people flock to, kind of with that affluency, and the allure of the beach and the oceans. So we don't have that part of Florida. Um, we've been doing some strategic thinking and planning, and talking to Robert Felton that works with you, going over some ideas with that. And then even when Matt Heiner and Mark were down with me, Matt's in Colorado Springs with a pretty affluent area, does a lot of fancy water features, has the Rocky Mountains as a backdrop. And so, talking with him about what to do. He's like, well, you just got to follow the money. It's like, either start building pools, or in your area, or something along that line. And we went down that rabbit hole. And I'm really starting to settle in my mind that, not that we need to close up shop and move, or just go and try to insert ourselves into a different part of Florida, but it's a natural progression for us to do some work in Ocala, which is about an hour south of us. So, and we do some work there. So there's two areas that we do work in outside of Gainesville, mainly landscape installation services. So not landscape maintenance, but we'll do projects in Ocala, Florida, which, like I said, is about an hour south of us, and it's a large kind of horse country area. So between horse country and then, retirees coming from up north, there's a lot more of that coming down. So they're selling their homes up north at a premium price, and then coming down to Florida, and they might sell their house for 800 or $1 million, and they come down to Florida and buy a $300,000 house, and it's nothing for them to drop 75 or $100,000 on their tiny little backyard. So for us, those are great projects. And so between Ocala and then, as I mentioned earlier, we were working on the East Coast. So I went to high school in St. Augustine, Florida, and did some work in St. Augustine and Jacksonville. So that's another natural fit with some connections that we still have to travel over there. And we might do 3 or 4 jobs a year, but if we turn 3 or 4 jobs a year into 12 or 15, then that could be a game changer to our top line and our bottom line. So we're exploring options of how to market in those areas, which you and I were talking about earlier. So, my biggest thing is how, through SEO or ad campaigns, or how we can make that happen and be successful.
Well, yeah, there's a number of things that are running through my mind, and one of them is partly to play devil's advocate with you for a minute and just share. I don't know. Sometimes people think, I love the idea of following the money and going there, and you're staffed and good at doing these design build projects, and that is a reason why you should do it. But sometimes people come to me and they think that they need to become a design build company when they're not, and they overstretch themselves trying to do design build, but they don't have the photos or the portfolio to support it. They don't have the people and processes, and it goes poorly, and they end up hurting their reputation. So I think following the money by selling what you're already good at is just something I wanted to share, because I have a number of maintenance clients who say, "Oh, I want to do design build because that's where the money is," and they're not ready for it. Or the design build people feel like, "Oh, I wish I had the steady recurring income of maintenance," and they open it and it doesn't go well.
And for us, and I've been in some of the guys that were in my peer group, a lot of them are very affluent areas across the country. So when we're talking about design build, for us, if we do a 15 to $30,000 job, that's a great job for us. In other markets, these guys are doing 100. They won't do anything less than 100 grand or 150 grand, or their ideal project is $250,000. It's like, well, that's not for us. Like, we haven't. I've never done a residential project that big. for SkyFrog. We might dabble in some larger projects if it's a commercial installation, which we'll do if the right job comes along. So, for Ocala, we try to set our minimum job at around $3,000 in Gainesville. So we'll do jobs. It's just kind of our minimum, what we figured out for, a crew to go out for a day with, a ballpark of average material for a day's worth of work. That's what we pick. So, that's what we tell people in our screening calls when they call in. For Ocala, if we've got a driving hour, okay, maybe it goes to a $10,000 minimum. And we're working on that now. So it's like, okay, if we have to go to Ocala, what's the smallest job? We don't need to go down to Ocala and just expect to do, $100,000 plus jobs. I think the last three jobs that we've done were between 40 and 60,000 in Ocala. So, which is still, a good sized job for what we would do in Gainesville. And,
So did it go well? Was it profitable?
no, they were. They
Good.
were. The only downfall is, it all depends on you get into design build, every job's unique. So it takes a little bit more skill. Every job's different. They're not cookie cutter jobs by any means. The only downfall was I had to be a little more involved. So, taking my time to go down and just making sure everything's going right. That was the only, but I still like doing that, as a business owner. I mean, I like getting out in the field and I mean, I try to I have to force myself not to be out in the field, but it's still a good thing to get out with the guys and run projects and be the face of the company. So the travel time going to Ocala for me would probably be the biggest hang up that I'm wasting 2 hours a day. But I say I'm wasting 2 hours a day in the truck. Some of the with my ADD, I guess some of my most productive time is while I'm driving. Like sometimes it's just like, if I can just like, let me just go drive. How about I just drive to Tampa, turn around and drive back? Give me 4 hours in the truck and see how many phone calls and things I can accomplish. And a lot of times it's pretty impressive. So
I'm in the office a lot, but I sometimes am out and about visiting. I have some clients here in Colorado or events that I go to, and I get so much done on the road, on a call, or I don't know. I just get inspired when I'm out and about, and I get a lot of creative work done. So as far as picking your hell yes customer and the budget could be different in Ocala, and yeah, building out your tree of good fortune with a limb for each city and a branch for each service. This is a key strategy. And, following the money, sometimes people come to us and they're like, Jack, we want SEO data to know exactly where we're going to go and build this thing. And I'm like, hey, you're actually probably not going to find any data that's going to support this decision. Meaning, like Google Keyword Planner might not give you the best number of searches per month in Ocala, but you have that local market intelligence, the market, and you see where things are going. And that's where we try to help our clients be entrepreneurial and see, hey, we're seeing a trend of people selling their house in Connecticut and moving to this part of the state, and they've got an extra 100 grand to spend on their landscape. Great, let's go for it. Let's build pages there. And some of my most successful clients have built them in the areas where they knew there was going to be demand, and it has worked. And then also sometimes it doesn't, right? So that's where it's entrepreneurial to me. It's somewhat risk taking, but it's like real estate investing. Like, we're going to build these pages where we know the market is or where it's coming.
and sometimes I get caught up on what I want to do in certain areas, or even in Gainesville, what areas of our business we want to focus on.
Uh-huh.
But I was on a call with some guys last week, and the topic was exactly what I mean. Marketing's the most trying to get leads is the most talked about thing that I think any landscape contractors will talk about. During a conversation if it lasts long enough. And we were discussing the fact of, well, maybe I shouldn't try to if I want to try to focus on growing our landscape lighting division in Gainesville. Great, that's what I want to do because I like doing it and I see it as a profitable book of work. But if pressure washing driveways is the most searched thing to do, in our area, or is 5 times, or 5x searched for versus landscape lighting, then maybe we need to crank our pressure washer up and try to pressure wash some driveways. I mean, or, just interesting as an example, or, whatever people are actually looking for the work. Because if no one's looking for landscape lighting and we're wasting all of our time and money trying to find it, maybe we should, put our focus on what's actually being searched for.
Well, and then I think there's client ascension, meaning maybe that client who buys you power wash their driveway and you have a sales conversation with them like, hey, by the way, have you ever considered uplighting that tree? And maybe what I found that works well in landscape lighting sales is to bring some lights and show people what it looks like. Because a lot of people, if they haven't experienced landscape lighting, they don't know that they want it. They have no idea what they're missing. But when they come out in their yard and there's lights shining up on a tree and the pathway is lit up and you show them, that was a tip that somebody who came on my podcast did, and he would have like a little event. He'd bring people wine. He'd make it like an evening experience of like, hey, we're gonna get together. I'm gonna bring wine and cheese. You guys relax. I'll bring you outside when it's done, and you show them the lighting. So that might just be an interesting thing to think about. Of is the power washer client going to become a landscape design client? Maybe, if you build a good relationship with them, and if it keeps your crews busy and you're doing it profitably, that could be a good strategy.
Yeah, so it's whatever. And since we're a full service company, I mean, we cover a lot of bases with what we're doing. So, between fertilizer applications, irrigation maintenance services, we do landscape lighting, and then obviously the design build type things, hardscaping, softscaping. There's a lot of crossover between a lot of those things. So, and then a lot of them are just incorporated. If we get a design build job where we're doing a renovation, then a lot of those other things kind of fall into play. So,
One thing that I think most landscape companies do poorly in the industry in general is communicating that they do the other services. And I think, a combination of print leave behinds, like the right brochures, door hangers, print materials, emails, postcards, phone calls, and like in-person conversations over time. Those are the things that you can control that can help you cross sell those other services to those customers. And one strategy, I had somebody on our podcast from All Purpose Landscaping. They did postcards and phone calls. So this was the key thing that they slated. I call it a call jam at Ramblin' Jackson, where we'll get 3 or 4 of us together. We meet on Zoom. We mute Zoom, and we literally call people in our database. And then we check in every 20 minutes and we're like, hey man, how's it going? How many people did you talk to? How did it go? And it builds a little accountability, like, because no one wants to do it. But once we start doing it, we start talking to people, we start having a good time. And anyways, All Purpose did this, and that's how they filled their book with Christmas lighting clients. It was, through this outbound approach. So I'm a big fan of, yeah, we're going to do SEO, and also hit them with postcards, hit them with emails, hit them with phone calls. And if your Hell Yes customer is selling their home and moving into an area, you can buy databases of people who are buying a new home, and you could send them gifts. You could send them a welcome gift. Hey, welcome to the neighborhood. So there are ways of buying that, and they Google you and see you, and they see the reviews. It's often multiple little touches over time that lead to the customer choosing you. I don't think there's any one single thing by itself that's going to do all of it for you.
yep. So I guess so in two ways, I guess we're trying to follow the money is what we talked about with dipping into other markets, dabbling in other markets a little bit more than we currently are, because we are doing that and have been doing that. But then also trying to chase in our Gainesville market, whether it's higher ticket sales or, as you mentioned, we're being more diligent with our quality control inspections. The past year, this season, our production managers did a really good job of that. And so that's just more, especially since a lot of people are still working from home, if not permanently, part time. So they're having a more face to face client interactions on their inspections, or if Tammy, who's my landscape designer, if she's slow, it's like, hey, why don't you grab like, you know, 3 inspections today or 4 inspections, and she'll go do the inspection. And then if she runs into the homeowner, then it's kind of like for them, it's, ooh, and a lot of times they'll already know who she is. But if she has to introduce herself, I'm the landscape designer, I'm just doing, a quality control inspection for your yard. And so that's just another another way for us to kind of follow that money with our current customers and having that in-person interaction, if there's time to do it, um, has been a pretty good success for us. So she's definitely sold some work just from being out and about.
I like that. One other strategy before we wrap up that's working for one of my clients is they have an account manager, and that person's job is to call customers, email them, and help them buy cross sells, help them buy the other services. That's their whole job. In this particular client, they do design build, they do maintenance, and then they also opened a pest control division. And I just asked them, I'm like, do you have anyone who's calling, like literally calling all of your customers? He said no. And he went out and hired somebody, full-time position that's a base salary plus commission on upgrading and retaining and renewing those clients. So I think, I think a focus on new customers and like SEO is absolutely going to help with that, and the right postcard at the right time and the right email. And I shared this in the mastermind. My landscape company who helped me with some work, they sent me a text message yesterday, and because they did a project for me. We couldn't get all of it done. I had an event here at the studio, and they texted me. They're like, "Hey Jack, do you still want to get that flagstone done in your alley? We have an opening to do it this week. Do you want it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do. How much is it?" So they were in between jobs, right? They were in between. I think they were waiting for material to arrive at a big project in another town. And so they had like a day, and they filled it by sending the right text message to the right customer at the right time.
We were talking, the topic came up in the mastermind earlier, but last week we've got a letter that we're going to send out to all of our maintenance customers, and we're going to try to go back through our CRM and uh, pull out jobs that didn't close. We've seen a lot of jobs, at least in our market. You know, Tammy's close ratio has definitely dropped the past couple of years. Whether it's economy driven or whatever's driving that. I think a lot of it's economy driven because we're not seeing a lot of the work you know, the work that's not being sold isn't being performed by other companies. It's just not being performed. So, the homeowners are either waiting, whether it's the economy and money, or, they're just not ready, or it's more than they thought. Whatever the scenario is, we're seeing that a lot of times that job's not being performed. So kind of the letter that we're going to write is going to be catered towards our maintenance customers and to them, and just kind of get out there and just mail that out and be a first step. But I like your idea of the call jam. It's especially for our maintenance customers, or if we have the email and the phone numbers for the proposals that have been sent out and not fulfilled the past couple of years. Just go ahead and send them a letter and then call them.
For sure. And even a text message of, "Hey Jack, have you finished your flagstone landing pad?"
Yeah.
Literally, that could be the whole email or text message. And so often people get busy, or they get sick, or they go on vacation, or their kid graduates, or like whatever life stuff is going on, and they actually haven't hired anyone. And you following up with them can reignite the whole sales conversation. So go
Yeah.
do it.
I like
Send
that.
some people a text today.
We definitely will.
Right?
Maybe not today. We'll crank that up tomorrow morning.
Okay, tomorrow morning. Yeah, it's 5:30
Yeah,
Eastern time for you. Well, Jason, hey,
it
thanks
is.
so much for coming on the Landscaper's Guide podcast. For folks listening, I'm going to put a link to your website and your podcast, greensideuppodcast.com, and check it out, guys. Connect with Jason. And Jason, anything else before we wrap up?
I think that's good. You can also find us on at SkyFrog Landscape and at Green Side Up Podcast on Instagram. For social media, that's kind of where I tend to follow the most. So
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, funny story. We've been interacting on Instagram for a while, and I didn't know it was you. I didn't know that I thought it was like some other guy named Jason, because it just says Green Side Up Podcast, Jason
listen, and Jordan.
and Jordan. And I didn't know it was you, but I felt like we had this like Instagram rapport going for a long time. And then we met at Elevate, and I was like, that's you? Like, awesome. So,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely connect on Instagram for sure. Awesome, Jason. Well, hey, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me on, Jack. I appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed today's podcast, and if you did, make sure you like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, where we release weekly inspiration to help you grow your snow and landscape company. My name is Jack Jostes, and I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video.